Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing very well this evening. How are you doing, Sarah?
It's not nighttime.
I
I
know.
realized it. I'm so used to us recording at night that it was like a Freudian slip thing that happened.
It's okay. It's okay. It's almost it's like late afternoon for me. So
yeah,
but it's a good Sunday afternoon. Hope you're having a good one as well.
And by the time that we actually drop the episode, it'll be night. So it's all good. It's all good.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah. So now we have Arrow coming to an end, but they also announced on Friday Supernatural season 15, final season.
Mm-hmm.
The ride is over.
The ride is definitely over, and I will freely admit I did not watch Supernatural. I mean I've seen a few episodes here and there, but I was not a big follower. But hey. I guess it's one of those things where I guess they got inspiration from Steven. Well, if he can call quits, I guess we can too.
I watched the first 5 seasons and I really got into it. And then most people, every time a show goes on for so long, you kind of go into it and you phase out of it and you come back into it. Mm-hmm. So I stopped for a few seasons. I tried to get back into it, couldn't really get back into it, but I'm still very impressed by what they've been able to accomplish. I mean, 15 years, nobody saw that coming.
Right. I mean, I think, they were only expected to last, 5, if that. Mm-hmm. And to make it to 15 years live action television that's remarkable. I mean, no matter how you cut it, whatever, yes, it's the CW, but no matter what medium, for a program to last that long, it's really remarkable, and continuing to have such a loyal following all these years. It's those guys definitely applauds to them.
What will be really funny and bizarre to see is if I don't know if Misha Collins gets a guest star role on The Flash in a later season. And suddenly you're just like, you're not Castiel. What are you doing? Is this the crossover?
Assuming The Flash gets some later seasons. I saw where it hit its all-time low this last week.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really like that episode anyway. So
that
episode committed one of the biggest TV sins. You teased the episode that finally Nora's going to tell the truth, and yet she tells the truth within the last 5 minutes. Are you kidding me?
I talked to some folks on Twitter about that episode some last week, and I agree that they committed the ultimate sin, and it was the ultimate clickbait as far as television. But at the same time, the other action, minus Cicada, I did like the Sherlock on piecing the pieces of the puzzle together. So it did have some good redeeming quality as far as the punch at the end. But yeah, it was definitely clickbait advertising the way they played that episode up.
Yeah, and we're not here today to talk about Arrowverse. We're here actually to talk about another show that is coming to an end, not forever, but the season finale did air this past week, Deadly Class.
Yes, please, Sci-Fi, go ahead and let people know second season's coming, because as of recording time, they have not.
Which is crazy considering how they left it. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was going into it and I'm like, okay, so now they're leaving ties. They're tying up things, but they're also leaving some openings for season 2. And then they leave the biggest opener ever in the fact that the final scene is Chico's father confronting Marcus and Maria with Chico's head in hand. and they just end it. And you're like, WTF? I could have done with all of Chester's nonsense within 10 minutes. I want to know what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, that was quite the ending. managed to make it through the weekend without getting spoiled about that ending. And when I saw that yesterday when I was watching the show, I was like, yeah, that was totally my reaction too.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
just was bizarre.
yeah.
Yeah, so they end the show like that, but let's rewind a bit and go to the very start. And let's talk about Lynn, because what I really liked what they did in this finale is there's been these parallel storylines throughout the entire first season. You have Marcus's story and you have Lynn's story. And with Lynn, well, in the previous episode, his wife gets shot dead by Chico's men.
Right.
And he's on the run with his daughter. And then Gao, like this man, which by the way, are we sure that they're in California? Because I've never seen a neighborhood with so many assassins around before. Like, where is this place?
Yeah, it's like underbelly of the underbelly of the underbelly. It's like,
right. And so he's making his way through these passages. There's some really intense scenes, especially the fact that his daughter's like trying to keep up. And then you think he's finally reached his final destination, but everybody else is dead. And that's because Gao knew he was heading there the whole time. And then she takes his daughter in that moment. So should Lynn have seen that coming, considering the flashback that they gave us in the previous episode with what happened to her?
He should have. He should have seen it coming. I mean, all throughout throughout the season, especially after Gao was introduced, there's been this tension and this dynamic of the family, and references to Lynn's daughter being brought into the fold. Mm-hmm. And so he should have seen that coming. But I mean, in that moment, after all the hell that they literally just had gone through and escaping El Diablo, and let's just go through that for just a second. I mean, that was the chase between El Diablo's men and Lynn and his daughter, and going through the restaurant and all the meat cleavers and it was just nonstop action in that episode, and it was just very heartbreaking to see, after surviving all that, at the very end, he's completely exhausted, beaten down, burnt, bruised, shot, and then just the sheer force of will that Lynn still had to try to keep his daughter from being taken away, to be indoctrinated into the family business, was just heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting that his last plea to Gao was, "She's not ready," which means like maybe he always knew that this was going to happen eventually. It's just that he was trying to preserve her innocence for as long as possible. And considering how young she is, I would also be like, are you sure she's ready to go to this temple? Can she even drive? No? Okay. I wouldn't say she's ready.
But she is pretty handy with a board. I mean, she took out the El Diablo's man with one good hit.
Right. So, well, I mean, you're raised by an assassin.
You're raised, necessity, you know.
Yeah, it's just, and I mean, this is, again, because he says she's not ready, and then Gao hits him with the "neither was I." Like, I like how they subtly built in that betrayal, because that's the same betrayal she felt as a child when he didn't intervene with what his father did to her.
Yep.
So really, I mean, an eye for an eye, an assassin, and this is where the story really is what they're trying to explore, the morality of what they're doing. They know that there are bad people in the world, and those bad people should die. But at the same time, what is your ethics? Where do you draw the line between right and wrong?
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up with the end, as far as how Gao felt that, Lynn did not stand up for her, and that subtext has been, and that has been interwoven throughout the season, is when they've had their interactions, and so it's not surprising that she ultimately took that action at the end and just ripping his daughter away from him and taking her to the temple to get trained. But yeah, so there's a lot of shades of gray in the show as far as the characters, and especially when we're first introduced to Len, it seemed that he seemed to be the most one of the more morally straight people in the show.
Mm-hmm.
and I really liked the way they developed that aspect of his family and showing that he is not the clean master of King's Dominion. And all throughout the season, we saw some of those things, like when he was having interactions with the other faculty members and the dynamics with some of the other teachers, and handling Marcus's situation when Marcus finally did break and tell him that yes, we were behind Chico's death, and so there were I mean, that's what I really liked about this series. Not everybody was black and white, and it definitely added some depth of character to each one of these individuals. So
right.
Yes, it was a lot of violence and other things going on in the background, but that was just more. That was, it wasn't like a procedural show in that regard. It was really really got into a lot of different elements, and and each week, even when they had it stumbled somewhat in the middle of the season with a few shows, still kept me engaged, because I did want to find out what was going to happen to all these people in King's Dominion.
Right. And I mean, to just go off of your point about the shades of gray, while this is going on, Marcus and his team is taking over Chester's house to try to kill Chester and everything he's created within a short period of time. And I want to first talk about Saya and Maria, because just like with Lin and Gao, there's another betrayal that happens again, and they've been also threading this needle as well throughout the entire season, where we meet these two girls. They're friends, they're allies, even though they come from very different backgrounds and have a different legacy to uphold. And Marcus is just a catalyst for what occurs, where they find each other. Like Saya sleeps with Marcus, Maria figures it out, and then they are both entering this war zone. And there's a few times where Maria's like, no, you can kill her. And then Saya's like, well, you can kill her. But they also do end up saving each other. And then ultimately, Saya walks away from it all.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting move for them to make with Saya's character, because it's so easy in these shows. We know Marcus and Saya are endgame. I'm sorry.
They are.
But they are.
They are. You were shipping that way back at episode 2?
Yeah, I think it was episode 3, which is where they got stuck in the school. Yeah, the rooftop scene.
Yep.
But it wasn't even about Marcus. So with everything she says, she doesn't really talk about him so much as what Marcus, Maria, and everyone else she's suddenly found herself associated with, what they are doing to her. And she's sacrificing all of this other stuff. And so there was something so beautiful about that moment. And I like how, even though Maria's face is completely covered in makeup and she looks so crazy, you see it in her eyes, the devastation of like, the one person who I could always count on, now I can't anymore. So what do I do?
Right.
And it's Maria, so she's going to go off the deep end again.
Yeah. There were several moments there with during those fight sequences where the stakes were very high, and he thought Saya and Maria would definitely be the ultimate team up and fight side by side with against Chester's minions. But Betrayal, it really is consistent with Maria and her. End of the day, as you said, I mean, the things that she was talking about were always about her.
Yep.
And the one thing that stood out to me with the characters, in particular Marcus, at the end, when he and Maria are breaking up, sorta.
Yeah.
Because that was very ambiguous how they were. One thing that really just kind of like stuck in my craw a bit with Marcus in that moment was when he said she was an obligation.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, okay, you stinky sexist pig.
I didn't. Thank you for bringing up that line, because I forgot about that moment. And even though it is very nasty to say that to someone, especially Maria and how fragile she is, it's the truth. She is an obligation, and that's also why Saya walked away.
Yeah.
Because they all are obligations for Saya.
Yeah, they are. And I guess, I mean, there's multiple layers to that. I think I'm glad you brought up Saya's feeling that they're obligations too, because honestly, when we go back to early stages of Deadly Class, Marcus was actually an obligation to Saya. So for him, it's very interesting for him now at the very end to basically say that to someone else, given his track record in the school. Yes, Maria was an obligation, but he did not have to take it to the places where he did.
Absolutely. But there's also this undercurrent of irony in what he's saying, because family, which is the very thing that Marcus has from the beginning desired to found at the school, found with this group of people, Maria included. And family is obligation.
It is.
So in a way, he's using it as an insult, but what he doesn't, and he probably uses it that way because he also comes from years of not having that obligation.
True.
And then to be thrown into this world, it's kind of like it's even more dangerous to have those obligations, because it's not only you who you're putting your life on the line. It's like that's something else that they did so well in this whole let's take down Chester thing, was those moments where they realized what they were doing, and that Marcus is putting everyone else at risk.
Yeah.
To the point where, I mean, I'm sorry we didn't talk about this before, Lex gets killed. We think.
Yeah, again, that's one of those open-ended things that we gotta have in season 2, y'all. Yeah, you're right though, and I really getting to how you expanded on the obligation and how I loved how they turned the inspirational speech, which is such a trope of some of these shows, on his head, and just like, wait a minute, Petra and Billy, and Petra in particular, was like, just stop already.
Right.
And so it was because of all the things that they've been through. Yes, there is that interwoven obligation to each other, but at the same time, these individuals are also still very selfish individuals, and it is a school of assassins, so it truly is survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
And so yes, we're going to work together to take out Chester, but at the end of it, but please don't lecture us about it and what we owe each other, because at the end of the day, we don't owe each other anything.
Right. You know what? Shout out to the stunt coordinator on this show, because this is a masterpiece of an episode for a stunt coordinator. They literally built a house with all of these traps and all of these different like booty traps, honestly. And it was just so fascinating where Sai and Maria would be fighting, and yet one door would open it and a crazy person would walk in and disrupt the fight, and suddenly they're attacking somebody else.
Yep.
And then a bomb would suddenly get planted somewhere or go off. And there were all of these, like, it was just really, really fascinating to see. And the choreography was done so well.
Yeah.
That it was brilliant. Now, it did skew into an area that makes me very uncomfortable. And I do admit that I skipped forward on a few of the more violent parts of the show because it got to this place like a Devil's Rejects Rob Zombie place where
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't like it, so I'm gonna just skip it because that stuff makes me just I don't want to watch that. I'm sorry, it's not. It makes me nauseous, and I can't. I don't. It gets under my skin. It makes me very, very. I don't know. It makes me unsettled.
Yeah, don't watch it alone late at night. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I just skipped forward to where they finally captured Marcus and Chester and him had the bizarre press conference or whatever it was. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that moment. Yeah, that was very bizarre. But again, it reminded me. Remember that movie Natural Born Killers?
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of that. And this.
Good call.
Yeah, and Mickey and Mallory characters and how pop culture and how Oliver Stone like really made it a commentary about violence and culture and all that kind of stuff. And Chester was doing that same kind of deal with this weird like video that he was trying to make himself this notorious being put in the annals of all crazy psycho killers. Mm-hmm. and it was very. I liked how Marcus played along with it. Okay, I'm going to play along with it just like I did for a good chunk of this season where I took credit for the foster home deaths. I'm going to do this now to Chester in order to get out of this situation. And then, when, of course, he cracked his head with the brick, and then, of course, fuckface met his demise with ironically with the dog named Peppermint.
Does anybody else notice how I say Chester during this review, and the moment Will can say fuckface, he does?
yeah.
It's just funny.
It's funny. Yeah. Well, I just like the name. It's just it's just a funny name that he has. I'm sorry. I just take advantage of it when I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah.
And he is a hard character to understand, and I appreciate that they tried to give him one semblance of empathy in that final showdown between him and Marcus, where there's that part where he says, "You were my best friend." Mm-hmm. We know he did some like not at all in any world right stuff to Marcus, but for him and his very skewed and screwed up perception of what friendship is, Marcus was that brother he never had and was that person he could rely on, and he liked the boys' homes because probably he's never had one before. Like, he's never had a place to be before and clean sheets and all that stuff. So the fact that Marcus burned it all down, literally, is really made him like out for vengeance, and he's going to take away everything that Marcus has found, and that's what he went out to do. And of course, Marcus wins, but see what happens with Chico's dad, though.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there, and but Marcus did lose. Even that, he still lost more family, which again, at its core, that was some of those things that was driving Marcus to begin with, was the fact that his parents were lost and everything. So yeah, I really liked the way they ended the storyline with Chester and Marcus. It was very fitting. In this fun house of horrors that was built up far as a season finale for a show named Deadly Class, I would have been disappointed if we didn't have that type of finale.
Yeah, and
Cringy moments and all.
They went all in on it.
Yeah.
They did not hold back. There was a few episodes this season when I was like, why did they call it Deadly Class? Like, I know they're assassins, but the violence isn't really happening, and I felt like they reserved all of that expenses and to get the right stunt choreographer, to get the right set pieces in place for that final episode, because that is just on a whole nother level. And I like the more we talk about this. Again, I just want to go back to this point about Marcus and that irony with his path. Because if he literally found a family and a home in a school that is meant to create assassins, which is supposedly one of the loneliest career choices you can make.
Right.
Because they always say, like, you shouldn't have ties. You're going to pick up, you're going to go on your mission, and you have to kill. And you don't want ties because you may get directed to kill somebody you love, or you put them at risk. So there, I wonder if overall that's where they're really going with Marcus, to make him realize that if he really wants a family, he can have it, but he can't have everything Lynn is training him to do or become.
Right. He can't, and we also see that with Lynn as well.
Yep, exactly. Wow, that got deep. That got a lot more deep. But if you haven't checked out Deadly Class yet, please do. The first season is pretty strong. It has its highs and its lows, but overall, I think it's a pretty well-rounded first chapter for a show.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So, surprisingly, that's the only TV show we're going to talk about today. We got some movies. We finally went to the theater.
Yeah. Went to the theater.
And more importantly, I beat watching something. I watched Captain Marvel before Will for the first time. I watched an MCU movie before Will did.
She did.
I've forgotten no. 1 week ago to the day. So yeah, let's get into this MCU Captain Marvel movie, which I don't know if controversial is the right word for it, but it's definitely mixed on Captain Marvel feelings, I think, out there.
Yeah, definitely. There's the couple things that we had the whole Rotten Tomato mess where a lot of the negative fanboy was already just trying to pepper bad reviews, feeling like, oh, it's a Me Too movie, whatever misogynist, whatever bad feeling they had, they were going to like unleash it on this film, and to the point where Rotten Tomatoes changed their rating system and everything like that. But at the end of the day, the MCU, as always, gets the last laugh because this movie is approaching $1 billion. So
second week.
Yes.
Like second week approaching $1 billion, and this the second largest like solo movie opening for a superhero.
Yep.
Yeah. Like 154 mil.
So negative fanboys suck it.
I mean, negative fanboys, you can be negative about what this movie stands for all you want. At the end of the day, you're going to go see it because you want your Avengers Infinity War fix.
Exactly.
Like, that's why it got all this money. I think that at first I was like, really? You're going to release this in March? You're going to release this right like a month before Avengers?
Yeah,
but it worked perfectly.
It worked. I mean, it's a model that worked before with Black Panther and another film that had very high expectations. I don't think Captain Marvel, and I don't know if it had. I mean, clearly it has the box office appeal and crossover appeal as far as, just generating a lot of money. But as far as a seminal cultural moment, it has some, but I don't think it is at the level of Black Panther was.
I agree. I agree. I actually think that over. It's very hard for me to say this, but overall, Black Panther is more of that culture movement than even Captain Marvel is, and I think they did that on purpose because they actually didn't really want to be in your face. Me too. I didn't get as much of that until like towards the end. There was a lot of clear Me Too references or Easter eggs or however you want to, like, subtext.
Yeah. Or empowerment, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I thought what was more interesting was some of the more subtler things that they did with the character, in the sense that they didn't over-sexualize her.
Yes.
Like in any way, and I keep comparing it to Wonder Woman, and just costume, appearance, angles on how they shoot. You can tell that one half of this directing team was a female, because I truly believe a female director will shoot a female character very differently than a male director would.
Yep.
Because perspectives are different. And you see that, and you saw that with Wonder Woman too, because you had Zack Snyder direct her and some of the bits, and then you had I'm forgetting her name.
Patty Jenkins, I guess, did about,
Patty Jenkins.
Yeah, I guess she did about 80% of the movie. Then the last act was all Zack Snyder.
Right. But at the same time, you also have, like, there were some good writing notes that I appreciated, because at the start of the movie, when we're first introduced to the Kree culture, Jude Law is talking to Brie Larson about how she has to keep her emotions in check. Like, you can't get emotional. And I'm like, this is an FU moment for all the men who tell women, keep your emotions in check.
Yep.
You're getting too emotional. Yep. Oh, fuck you. And there was the best line at the end where she really does do that FU to him, where she's like, I have nothing to prove to you.
Exactly. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Those are definitely the more in-your-face moments of, if you want to go call it female empowerment, whatever, it's fine. That part of the film, I have a daughter, so, more empowerment, the better. Whenever I get the first opportunity to take her to see this film, I will. So, because it's great to see, like Wonder Woman, strong lead characters on film, regardless of whether it's a superhero film or something else, or a film about STEM. I mean, it's just good to see that. But I did overall, I enjoyed Captain Marvel. But I did, and especially when seeing it within 3 days of another franchise film, my biggest quibble with the film is it just seemed very vanilla MCU, in that it didn't break any new ground for me as far as the universe. It did fill in the gaps for a lot of things that already established. It established how the Tesseract was found and other things as well. And I'm sure that was intentional, because part of me thinks that, okay, this film is, in a way, we're going to use it as a bridge to Endgame, to basically wrap up phases 1, 2, and 3 of the MCU. And so from that standpoint, it was good. It was entertaining, but I just felt like, told you my initial reaction was, it felt like I ranked it around Captain America: First Avenger. Right. And that's how it felt to me. It was a good origin film, set up the character very well, clearly sets up Captain Marvel as the heir apparent to Captain America in the MCU, as far as the character. and it was entertaining, but it didn't feel like it carried the ball too much forward for me.
Right. Okay. I when you first asked me after watching it where I would rank it, I felt very put on the spot. I felt
I
like you
like doing
should
that.
never ask that question. It's just rude, and it was just mean. And because I instantly was like, it's on par with Winter Soldier, and I know that's a controversial statement to make, but I am going to stand by it. And I think that a year from now, people will say the same thing because I agree. Anything the prequel aspect of this movie is that vanilla on par with Captain America First Avenger. I will agree. But that's maybe 40% of the plot. If you
Yeah,
just focus on her as a character and the implications with the scroll and the Kree and what that could set up for where we go after Endgame, that is what I'm interested in.
hmm
And I put it on par with Winter Soldier because of the twist, because of the main reason why I walked out of the meeting and I was like, that was a well written story.
yeah,
Because from start to finish, you didn't see that coming. You didn't. A lot of people say, well, I saw it coming because of the trailers. They made Jude Law feel like the bad guy. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I stopped watching the trailers then
yeah.
because I didn't get spoiled in the slightest.
I didn't feel that it was predictable as far as that twist. I enjoyed the twist.
Right. I really like it, and it kind of makes me even want to go back and rewatch it a second time, although I probably won't because I'm lazy. It but I like that idea that we have to really realize that for 6 years she has been told these stories about who she is, where her power comes from, what she is supposed to do, and it's all about Kree. And she's been indoctrinated into this society, and that is what she's fighting for. And so the fact that Sam Jackson calls her as Rogue Soldier, it's not because she's suddenly realizing she's human, it's because she realizes that everything she was told about what she was fighting for and why is a lie, and that's very it's parallel to what happened to Steve Rogers in Winter Soldier.
Gotcha.
And then
Fair.
they do the twist, and
Yeah.
I love that twist because you can still make Skrulls the bad guy.
hmm
Like that is talk about ambiguity. You can still there can be a rogue Skrull who creates an army and tries to invade Earth, and then Captain Marvel has to come in because even Talos admits it. Like he has blood on his hands too. Like
He does.
nobody is innocent in this war, and that's what I thought was so interesting that they didn't fully execute it, but I saw what they were trying to do in terms of the ambiguity of war.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree with you there. That and now I see now that we've had a chance to talk about it because I did punch you on the spot, and I'm sorry I punched you on the spot.
No, he's not. He's happy.
I'm happy I did. We always put each other on the spot because yeah, we always do that instant reaction, but at least I do. And usually I'm the one getting to say, "Hey, Sarah, I got to check this out. You got to go
Yeah.
see it."
Yeah.
I eat Aquaman, and then I set it up too high, and then she ends up being. You're wrong, Will, but I digress. I see what your point about Winter Soldier, and I appreciate what, as you said, what they were trying to achieve in that arc, especially with having blood on their hands and with that aspect of it, I almost feel like it sort of gets into Avengers 2 Ultron and Civil War, especially with the Sokovia Accords down the road.
Interesting.
That this is a messy business, and it does get into the philosophical arguments that Captain America and that Steve and Tony were getting into with should the Avengers sign on to the Accords or not. So from that standpoint, I totally get it, and it's a very, very messy business. And you are right. That is the stronger part of the film. That I guess that third act, where we do get the twist and things do. And I will say I did enjoy that portion of the film a lot more than the beginning. Once we had that part of the story go forward.
Right.
So,
I also just want to, like, and I've heard that pretty consistently with anybody reviewing this movie, that the beginning is the weaker part. The middle, it gets really poignant, and then the end, in my mind, commits the Wonder Woman sin of having a unnecessary, larger than life spectacle occur, which drove me crazy. But whatever, I get it. She's all powerful.
Yeah, that was my only other. I was wondering how you felt about her power ratio, because, man, at this point, do we even need the rest of the team?
I just it so annoyed me. Like, after the first, as soon as she lifted, okay, she stops all of the missiles, okay, but then she goes to the ship and starts blowing thing up, and I'm like, stop, just stop it. Like, I know they're the bad guys, but at the same time, this is so unnecessary. We know she's a badass. You don't need to. I felt like they showed all their cards with her powers.
Yeah.
And they could have held back. And I think it would be stronger if they had held back, because when we get to Endgame and she does something on that level, that would have been more of a surprise. But they already showed it in this movie. And so it went on too long. Way too long.
And you're right. I'm glad you brought that up, that they should have held back, because she really hadn't fully realized her potential, especially in those early scenes at the beginning of the film when she is fighting Yon-Rogg. And for her to get that power curve at the back end, where she is like, again, I'm like, okay, what's the point of having Thor, Hulk, and everybody else? Because she could basically take Thanos out with just one punch.
Well, we don't know, because she only has the power of one Infinity Stone. Yeah. She only has the power of one Infinity Stone.
Yeah, she has the power of the Tesseract. I mean, he has them all, but again,
he has 4 others.
Yeah, he
4 times the power.
Yeah. He does, but
should we call Science Guy and Science Guy?
True. I'm glad you said that.
Who should be nominated for an Oscar based off of his performance? And I want to go back and watch the movie and watch the first act when she first gets captured by the Skrulls to figure out who Science Guy is. That's just the best moment ever.
Yeah, it is a very good moment. It's a very good moment, folks. If you haven't seen it, hopefully if you've seen it, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't seen it and you made it through the spoiler cast, thank you.
Yeah.
But but I'm glad you brought up about the power thing, because I guess it's on par with Vision as far as having one stone, because he had the which stone? So and Thanos pretty much took care of Vision. So
yeah, he kind of killed him a few times.
Yeah, that's true. But to our original point, that the power curve was a bit much.
Yeah, so, it got out of hand, and it's totally unnecessary. I mean, again, this goes back to my point about why I put this movie more closely to Winter Soldier, is because right before they just let her loose, again, there's another betrayal in that she realizes that the Kree blood that she's been getting transfused into her for the past 6 years has done nothing but stifled her power,
Hmm.
when the reality is like the power Marvel in a way gave her all those years ago is really just bursting at the seams and is trying to get out, and that's what she's had all this time. And I think that again is a nice twist, especially because they planted this very subtly, but the first time you see the crash in the very beginning of the episode, blue blood comes out of her nose because
Hmm.
it's Cree,
Hmm.
because she's remembering it as if she has always been in need of this Cree blood, or that's like they started the transfusion to save her life there. And then in the last flashback towards the end, suddenly it's red blood. Like
Hmm.
she's still human. And I was like, that's a pretty good
That's
editing choice.
that's a very good detail there that you raise, and 'cause I missed that again. It's her reestablishing her connections with her home,
Right.
and also ridding herself of the Kree indoctrination, because there was, as you rightly said, whenever she first remembered the moment when with the crash and everything, it was always the scroll that was coming there with the pistol. And then whenever, when Thalos told her the truth, and she really was able to fully release her memories, she realized that it was John Rogg who was actually the one that was coming at her.
Yeah. Yeah. Can Thalos be in the next movie?
I hope so.
Um,
But I hope so.
he Ben Mendelsohn was brilliant, even though he was in makeup so much of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved him. Jude Law was all right. He kind of wasn't that big. Didn't have that big of a presence.
No.
And in fact, and I think where one of the mistakes are is if you felt the betrayal that occurs between her and the Kree could have been more prevalent if we had spent more time with her, um, young Rogue, and the rest of the Kree crew, and really got to know how they're a unit. And then because we didn't really get that, we don't have much ties to them being a team.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Um, something they do not make subtle at all is photon.
Yeah. Not at all.
Photon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seed has been planted.
That seed is definitely planted for phase 4.
Definitely.
And
Um,
yeah,
and the
and
flirkin,
the
flirkin,
the flirkin.
flirkin.
And we finally get the truth about Nick.
Yeah. I'm still on the fence about that. I could go either way. In the
Yeah.
moment I was laughing.
Yeah.
Retrospectively, it was kind of undermining who we thought Nick Fury was in a way. I don't know.
Let's. Yeah. Speaking of which, but I just have to. I was wondering how well the de-aging of Samuel L. Jackson and Clark Gregg was going to hold up, and it held up. It was very believable.
Yeah,
It was,
100%.
yeah, it was amazing. I can't go without talking about the film without raving and praising the special effects job that they did on both those gentlemen. Yeah, I mean, Samuel L. Jackson looks even younger as 1990s Fury than he did in Pulp Fiction. I mean, they did
Yeah.
during the same time period, and that was just a phenomenal job. And also I liked, again, getting to some of the origin pieces is just filling in some of the gaps in the MCU as far as the origins of how did Fury and Coulson become teammates. And so those were nice. I don't know if say it was necessary, but it was just nice to fill in those gaps in the history of this universe that we've been watching now for over a decade.
Sam Jackson is just having the time of his life
Yeah.
in these movies, and I don't foresee him ever getting tired of this character, of being in this universe,
Yeah.
because now they can de-age him and he can have all the fun.
Yeah.
Like and I felt that. I felt like in a
Yeah.
way this was his reward for all of his time
Mhm.
coming in, giving giving just exposition on
Yep.
the events and bringing people together and not
Mhm.
really being able to save the day. And granted, he saved the day with a cat.
Yep.
It was a very high functioning threat level high cat.
Yeah.
Threat level high, and then they scan him. Human man, 0. That was a great.
That was a great, yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a great. But I felt like in a way they gave him. They're like, no, we're gonna take this opportunity. We know we want to do a prequel. We want to recognize that there is a reason why Shield has been around for so long.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing we tend to forget. Like, Shield didn't create, like, come because of the Avengers.
Right.
The Shield created the Avengers and
Yep.
brought these people together because
Yep.
that's what they've been doing. They've been tracking. So it was kind of nice to see like some of the earlier stages of Shield and
Mhm.
have that really be the focus rather than the little teaser or the opening scene that's like the prologue or the epilogue.
Right.
So I mean that's all good, but he just was having fun, and him and Brie Larson surprisingly had great on-screen chemistry.
They did. They did. They were really believable as a team, and it sets up very well for Endgame and also the end of Infinity War. Why she had the pager. They were very believable as a unit, and why she. Yeah, I mean the banter between the two, the jokes. I mean everything that worked very well. And you're right. I mean Sam, it was a reward for all the work, and also it fleshed out Fury as a character.
Right.
That so we can, as you said, we can really appreciate the more now when we rewatch the MCU films why Shield is the way that it is and why he is the way that he is in those films.
And there's something very 90s about having two people randomly get paired together with their own baggage and they have to save the world while working through that baggage.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds exactly like a buddy cop movie.
Totally.
And you know, I keep putting it out there, but I feel obligated to. There was something so interesting, or it's really interesting to look at that relationship. No sexual tension. They're
No.
not romantic interests.
Nope.
It's more of a best friend, buddy,
Mm-hmm.
comrade. It's not even a father figure, I would argue.
No, it's not. It was. I didn't get that vibe at all. It truly
No.
was. You were right. It had that buddy cop vibe.
Right, right.
Riggs and
Which
Murtaugh.
and yet the two together carry so much of this film,
Mm-hmm.
which is very different than how watching Wonder Woman. Yes, Gal Gadot did a great job, but I think that most of her performance is only enhanced because Chris Pine she's allowed to play off of his character and he brings so much charisma to that movie and to his part, and there is that romantic tension, there is that like sacrifice. And so again, this movie does not go the standard typical route and say, hey, you have to have a love interest.
Yep.
I mean, that's something that the MCU usually does, but they didn't in this movie, which I think was very strategic of them not to do.
Yeah. I agree, and that's a very good point. And it didn't need it. It did not need it, and it would have undermined the story if it had gone that way.
Yeah, because it was more about her and where her realizing who she is, who she was, and then trying to figure out where do you go from here. And I like the fact that they made it very. I thought it was a really good rationale, because the movie should answer, why isn't she on Earth?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you realize you're from Earth, why wouldn't you want to stick around and figure out and just be back on your home planet? And she's like, no, I don't belong here anymore, obviously. So she goes off and fights wars in the galaxy.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for us on Captain Marvel. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for, or I have not been waiting for this moment because I know what's going to happen.
Oh,
Will is going to hype me up and I've already seen it on Twitter. I know that Shazam's going to be an amazing movie. Will it cure cancer?
no.
Okay.
No, it will not cure cancer, but it will make you, if you're dealing with it or any bad day or whatever, it will definitely leave a smile on your face.
Okay. Well, that was pretty obvious from the trailers.
Yeah, I know it's very obvious, but I, but I will say this, and to set this up properly, because the DCEU has historically been a very grim place with their various films. As you said, Sarah, the trailers do show how funny and silly it is, as far as Shazam. But again, the trailers don't really. This is another example of where the trailers really do not do a good service of selling them. And no, not all the best funny moments are all exposed in the trailers. So,
Spoiler alert.
spoiler alert, definitely. I'm not going to give them any away. I'm not going to go. This will be a spoiler free thoughts on the film. So, I did take advantage of the Fandango early screening, and so it was. I guess my overall thoughts on the film, and you've probably seen a lot of this on Twitter or social media places. Definitely, it's a fun movie. It definitely has a lot of heart, but it also has some heft to it as well, as far as the story. And I will just say that as far as the two main protagonists, as far as Billy Batson and the antagonist, Dr. Sylvain, played by Mark Strong, they are real dualities of each other. And the story really works well. Taking two individuals who have similar situations in their childhood, and shows how the wizard who is the guardian trying to find his champion, how they play out with one another. And so the film was very good about that. One of the things that this film does a good job of, it definitely does a good job of balancing the humor, but also there are some scary moments and dark moments in it. I mean, after all, it is rated PG-13, but more so than Aquaman, more so than Wonder Woman, it really balanced. It finally hit that right note in the DCEU as far as the humor and the grimness, hit that right balance. I really believe that it did that very, very well. It definitely references, it does acknowledge that it is in the larger context of the DCEU, so they don't ignore it. There's some very nice little bits in it where you do see Superman and Batman, and references to some of the other characters as well. Mark Strong's character is definitely the strongest villain that the DCEU has had. I mean, we had Steppenwolf and Justice League.
We had the God of War in Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Basically CGI characters. So you're telling me that Shazam has a villain that is a human being, like flesh,
Yes.
not
Flesh.
full CGI?
Well, there are some CGI accompaniments to the human villain, but yes, they are. But even the CGI villains that accompany the human villain, they are supporting characters and not the lead. Mark Strong's character is the lead villain, and he's really, really good. I mean, he was given a character that could easily be a very one note kind of villain of the week kind of deal, and really provided some texture to why he is so hell-bent on getting his revenge on the wizard who grants the powers of Shazam to Billy Batson.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I think you've said enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know we're coming up. Yeah, but
any final point?
Final point, stay to the very, very end. You will be rewarded I mean, to the very, very end of the credits. They do have some MCU elements to it. Some nice little cameos that will make it worthwhile. And it really is a very, very good movie. I think it's probably, at least in my opinion, the best DCEU film to date.
Wow. All right. Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I know when I listen to a spoiler-free review of these movies, I'm always curious, well, is there an end credit scene? How long do I have to wait? And is it beneficial for me to wait till the very, very end? So I appreciate you adding that in there. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you and tweet their reactions of Shazam?
Yes, if you've seen it, and make sure you tag it with spoiler alerts, because the film doesn't open until April 5. But tag me at Will M Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me on Twitter at SJBelmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on SoundCloud and Spotify and iTunes. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.